before we get started, let's have a quick background of why we're here. Early or anticipatory action is an innovative approach that enables action before an extreme weather event occurs. The aim is to prevent, to mitigate, and to the extent possible, all the impacts of extreme weather on highly vulnerable people. It works when early warnings are generated and communicated in such a way that those at risk can understand and act on them, and when the warnings are linked to pre-agreed plans that are sufficiently financed to support those actions. We know that we are facing a rapidly deteriorating climate. In fact, according to the IPCC, right now, approximately 3.5 billion people live in countries which are highly vulnerable to climate impacts. Compare this to our ability to act early. 1/3 of the world's people, mostly in least developed countries and small island developing states, are still not covered by early warning systems. When early warning systems exist, they are not always effective or designed with the vulnerable communities in mind. And there's a widening gap in the funding necessary and needed for early action. Billions are delivered each year to respond to climate crisis, but just a fraction, a mere tens of millions, is going towards anticipatory. So obviously there's a huge gap here, and systematic change is going to be required from all of us. And that change must be linked and initiated across all sectors. The IFRC estimates that without action, the number of people in need of humanitarian assistance due to climate impact alone would reach 200 million people by the year 2050, which may push the already strained humanitarian system to its breaking point. And I think you hear today from my colleague Geno that we are kind of almost there in terms of this crisis. Of course, it's always a stark reminder of why partnerships that bridge sectors are so important. And I'm pleased to be able to introduce a set of speakers here today who will share their insights on how well existing partnerships are working in this space and what more is needed. So I will introduce the first panel. Sitting here from this order is my colleague Geno Laganda, who is the Director of Climate and Disaster Risk Reduction at the United Nations World Food Programme. Sitting next to him is Johan Stander, the Director of Service at WMO. And last but not least, Christopher Hamel, the Head of Climate Impact Response, Office of the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change. Welcome, panel members, to this discussion. Before we go into our discussion, I thought it would be really powerful to be able to show to people what anticipatory action looks like in real life. It's become a real big buzzword. And so we have a video from the World Food Programme that shows you what it looks like for communities that are on the front lines of climate change. Can we cue the video, please?
Where WFP is delivering forecast-based anticipatory action programs to thousands of families.
Yeah.
When forecasts from July and August this year predicted a drought, WFP triggered 3 anticipatory actions. We informed the local community of the forecasted drought and shared ways to cope to reduce the impact on their land, livestock, and most importantly, their families. WFP provides cash transfers to help families prepare for the drought. They can buy nutritious food for their families and protect their assets and livestock. In the Somali region of Ethiopia, WFP is supporting fodder production to help reduce potential livestock loss from the predicted drought. We must stop predictable climate hazards becoming humanitarian disasters.
All right. Geno, I want to start with you. This is your bread and butter, like the anticipatory action. So why are anticipatory action and partnership for anticipatory action relevant for COP?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you also to our host for inviting us. I would say anticipatory action is relevant at COP because the aid system is buckling under the load of climate change, conflicts, and food prices and energy prices that are shooting through the roof. When you looked back 20 years, you didn't see many humanitarian organizations here at COP. But 20 years later, as ambitions to mitigate climate change have not been ambitious enough, as adaptation investments have not come fast enough, they were not targeted enough, they have not been at scale enough, now we're in this era of loss and damage. And these losses and damages to food systems and livelihoods, they are borne by households, they're borne by governments, and they are borne by an aid system that was neither designed nor resourced to deal with a barrage of onsets as the one that we currently see. Just to give you a number, in 2019, we had about 135 million people who were acutely food insecure. That means they were affected by a shock of some sort. 2 years later, we are at 345 million people. And these people are caught between a rock and a hard place. That means between climate impacts, between inflation that skyrockets, between social tensions and conflicts that come in the wake of competition for scarce resources, in the wake of displacement. So that's really the bad news. The good news is that we do not need to put another decade or two into researching how we can make the international aid system more forward-looking, more proactive. We know how to, on the one side, predict climate extremes with great technology. We know how to downscale global or regional climate models even to places that do not have functioning observational networks. We know how to target the most vulnerable people and to get support to them. We are working with drones, we're working with artificial intelligence, we're working with mobile payments. So there is a lot of innovation in the humanitarian system that needs to be brought to bear to make it more forward-looking. And this is why I think anticipatory action for us is such a critical element of COP. It was never really meant to, I think, be a climate topic, but we are at a point where climate extremes are just really too frequent, and I think they undermine everything else that we're trying to do here. Once food systems are breaking down, then basically there is no funding, there is no attention on anything else. You just need to deal with the existing shocks, and you forget all about prevention and adaptation and resilience building. So this is, for us, a very central piece to the international aid architecture in the next few years.
Okay, thank you so much, Geno. Johan, I want to turn to you. The UN Secretary General has set up an early warning for all initiative. Why is this initiative important in terms of scaling up anticipatory action?
Elizabeth, thank you. Fellow panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and partners. I think when the UN Secretary General announced the Executive Action Plan earlier this week with the WMO, it was really for us extremely pleasing to see the amount of support we got from heads of states, those ministers, the investors, and all other partners, because this action plan and the implementation of this going forward cannot be done alone just by the WMO. We need to work with everybody. And with that, I think it's important that we would like to thank the humanitarian agencies who really worked with us tirelessly to set up this action plan. For instance, REAP, IFRC, UNDRR, UNDP, WFP, UNDP, just to name a few of those who really contributed in this executive action plan. It is, at the end of the day, the UN Secretary General made an interesting call. He said, we're on the his exact words were, we're on a highway to climate hell. And you know, the people today is at the forefront of this, those that are the most vulnerable. The importance is to get the message to them. The World Meteorological Organization, or let us say the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, are the authoritative voice when it comes to impact-based forecasting, to make sure that the people understand the message when it gets across. But it's not our responsibility to make sure it gets to those people on the ground. We've got to work with partners, with the IFRC, with REAP, with the Red Cross, name them. Because those people in the most vulnerable areas excuse me, in the middle of Africa, we've got no internet, no mobile connectivity. Those are the people we need to reach because they are the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
They feel the pinch of climate change, and we need to get the message to them. If we look at the broader plan, 3.1 billion requested as initial, but that's nothing. If we consider that the return of investment is roughly 24 billion, that's half of what is requested of the total action plan. So we can get there by working with our partners. We should remember that this executive action plan was built on the 4 important pillars of the multi-hazard early warning systems framework. The WMO will only lead one of those. I4C will lead the other one, UNDRR the other one, and ITU the other one. But at the end of the day, we still need to work together to make sure we get to that end goal. There's no time for duplication, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
We've seen this week that there are multiple projects running in the same country doing the same thing while they're not talking to one another.
Yeah.
We can utilize those funds much better by putting everything under one umbrella, and that's what's so wonderful about this action plan, putting everything together towards a common goal. The last thing I want to follow up is, after this COP, it's important that us, our members at the WMO, who are everybody's members, the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, partner with the agencies in the countries around to really ramp up this global action plan and for the implementation. We will draw on the best available expertise and knowledge, those from the technical commissions and those from outside capacity development, to make sure that we get to this important milestone at the end of the day. But the key is partnership.
Yeah.
Is key. We can't do this alone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, Christopher, we've heard from Geno that, there are solutions that exist. This is an issue that is solvable. Johan has reminded us that it's going to require partnership, but I think the reality on the ground is often that it does take a lot. It takes effort, it takes money, it takes, everybody coming together to create a equitable partnership. What do you think is going to be needed to scale all this work that we are talking about? And UAE is a big advocate for anticipatory action. So what are your ambitions?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Okay.
Fellow panelists. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I'd like to start by just responding to how you teed up the question, which is that this topic, there's strong support for this topic and agenda from our side, from the UAE side. And that's because it's an area that marries things that are practical, technology, leveraging different local cultural knowledge and cultural responses with the different resources that partners can bring, whether it's technical, financial. It's a pragmatic solution to a problem that's deadly serious, and when you get it done right, it can really move the needle in changing the situation on the ground in terms of vulnerability, fragility, and conflict. So it's broadly and deeply aligned with UAE's vision in terms of where partnerships can be brought together to really try to advance the cause. In terms of what can be done to scale up, I think it starts with statements like this, that countries are ready to partner, that they're not just interested in talking. And I think from our point of view, we're happy to announce today that we have officially joined the Risk-Informed Early Action Partnership. So we are now members of the partnership, and we look forward to participating on that platform. And as we look out over the next 12 months, coming up to our own COP presidency, to see how we can be involved actively as a champion to try to use the platform to mobilize more support. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of ambition that's here. So we're ready to partner to get this across the finish line. Thank you.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the membership. And I have a follow-up question, because you have the COP28 presidency. What kind of partnerships do you think you're going to need to help you deliver?
So, Elizabeth, I hope you'll appreciate that you're putting me in a bit of a tough spot, because here we sit at COP27, and I think we're aware that we're having a very early discussion now. So I guess what I would say is we are here, and we hear you.
Yeah.
And we are in listening mode, and we are open to hearing different ideas for what partnerships could look like. Partnerships that would be impactful and that can get done in a shorter time frame rather than a longer time horizon. So we're here and happy to continue the conversation after the panel.
Thank you so much.
you.
I want to actually allow for a two-way conversation. Is there any burning question in the audience? Because very soon we'll be switching to a different panel discussion. There's a hand over there, sir. May we pass a mic?
Thank you to the panelists and for this interesting discussion.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
Raydan Al-Saqaf. I'm actually from the RCO, but my question behind this event is on, we heard about the limits of adaptation the last couple of days. What are the limits of anticipatory humanitarian action? There's only so much you can do to prepare. So how can we do this better? We still see what we saw in Pakistan.
Okay. Gena, do you want to take that? Yeah.
I think
John?
I'm going to try and
Yes.
give a shot at that one. One thing that we've learned in this process when we developed the action plan with the partners is exactly what you've now addressed. And that is because there's not good or appropriate communication between the National Meteorological and Hydrological Service, the UNDRR agencies, the IFRC, or other humanitarian agencies in that particular country. And I think the action plan is set up in such a way that it forces those to work together going forward, because we've got no other choice than to do it. Number one, something that also came out yesterday in one of the other sessions is, I think somebody from a small island state mentioned that if there's a small cloud on the horizon, everybody's tweeting there's the next hurricane on its way, without going to to go back to where the message should come from. It goes back to the authoritative voice. And this is where we can work closely with RIP and other
Yes,
humanitarian
definitely.
agencies to say, okay, this is not the real message, this is the real one. Let us all pull together, make sure the proper message gets across. But we'll get there, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Geno, can you come in as well?
Thank you. I want to add one element here. The limit of anticipatory action is basically an underfunded humanitarian system. Because when you want to respond to something in the space of uncertainty based on a projection or based on a prediction, and you misfire, basically you use humanitarian funds for things that have not yet happened and then they don't materialize, that money is missing from other humanitarian crises. Just consider that at the moment only basically 50% roughly of all humanitarian needs are covered with the existing humanitarian aid envelope. So when you try to now introduce innovation in a humanitarian system that is already short, where we already have to cut rations in places, then it's not the easiest starting point to talk about anticipatory action in other countries, because you have underfunded operations in so many places. So that's a bit of a, I would say, a factor that is holding us back. I think one way to crack that nut is to make sure that every time we provide anticipatory action in the field, we do the economics of it. We study how people fare when they have received anticipatory cash transfers, what they have spent these cash transfers on, and what the impact has been, and then compare it with a conventional humanitarian response that is much more expensive, but happens only after people are already in a difficult situation. So I would like to add that.
Okay. Crystal, yeah. Well, I think we are going to move on to our next panel discussion. So can you please help me in thanking our panelists? Okay. And so as they exit the stage, I am going to, thank you so much. Thank you, my mic. As they exit the stage, we have a powerful video for you to see. So the RIP partners have collectively committed to making 1 billion people safer from disaster by 2025 through scaling up and mainstreaming early action. They set themselves 4 ambitious targets that together will achieve their aim. And they've produced a fantastic video that explains how far they've come. So we're going to watch this, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask our next speaker to move to stage.
Through Target 1, REAP ensures that comprehensive disaster and climate risk management approaches are mainstreamed in countries. The REAP partners are already working with governments to integrate and develop synergies between climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction strategies and policies. The partners have now conducted a mapping of who's doing what and where, And this mapping will help make best use of our comparative advantages in supporting the governments. There is a strong will among the governments for integrated approaches to risk management, and REAP acts as a key vehicle to drive the collective efforts of all the stakeholders.
REAP's work on early action finance covers a broad range of areas. These include advocating for increasing the levels of finance available, ensuring that existing finance is better aligned and used more efficiently, and embracing diverse sources of finance, including through the private sector, to ensure that early action plans can be activated ahead of disasters. REAP recently published a groundbreaking report on scaling up finance for early action, where the partnership made 6 important recommendations for what to do next. And because of the breadth of the partnership and the trust placed in REAP, it has been able to convene key stakeholders to talk about concrete ways in which the recommendations will be implemented.
Reaching the last mile is still a standing challenge, especially for least developed countries where there are poor infrastructure but also weak institutions. That's why only 40% have reported to have multi-hazard early warning systems. More commitments are needed, particularly to improve early warnings through a robust infrastructure and strong institutions for early action. Resources need to be mobilized and should be accessible by institutions and communities, most importantly, as the first victims, but also as first responders to disasters.
To make progress on Target 4, REAP partners are exploring how to keep people at the heart of effective early warning systems. The REAP Risk Communication Working Group brings together a wide range of stakeholders, from government, telecoms, Hydromet, Earth observation, media, and academia. REAP is convening these actors to support the WMO to develop the Executive Action Plan for the UN Early Warnings for All initiative.
Okay. Our next discussion is going to get into the weeds, the practical elements of AA. So with me is Antonio Beleza, Deputy Director of the National Emergency Operations Center at the National Institute for Disaster Management in Mozambique. I have Rania Ahmed, Deputy Regional Director of MENA, International Federation of Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies, and then Leslie Ndlovu, CEO of African Risk Capacity Limited. I want to start with you, Rania. How do we ensure that early warning and early anticipatory action is meeting the needs of the most vulnerable?
Hello?
It should be on.
Hello?
Yes.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to speak here today. And in response to your question, when it comes to climate change, I think everyone is vulnerable. Yeah. So there is no one vulnerable and one not vulnerable. Yeah. When it comes to early warning, early action, it's very, very important to put into consideration to listen to people when it comes to anticipation. Sometimes we sit and we think that we know it all. Yeah. We don't recognize that people come from different culture, context, communities should be taking part into the early warning messages, engaged into the early action. I'm so glad that this year, the Early Warning for All initiative that has been launched on the 7th of November within the COP has been focusing on engaging different organizations, policymakers, community organizations like IFRC, but UN agencies and others. And it's great because we see a shift on how we deal with certain subjects and how we come together to find solutions. When it comes to vulnerability, IFRC is working in 192 countries with national society, with volunteers, as we say, in every street. So basically, we can reach to every community in every street with the right messages, but it's how to tailor the right message to reach the people in the right time. How to ensure it's disseminated in a language they understand, and how to follow up and monitor that when early warning or anticipation planning has been done, people have been acted upon. I remember very well at the beginning of this year, ACMI came with a research, very interesting one, and one of the important things that highlighted that Delta area is under threat. Great, and they went and they told people in Alexandria, you have to move. And they told them, no, we will not move. And they were very surprised why they will not move. First of all, giving them a warning, early warning that the Delta area is under threat is great. But you didn't give them solution. You didn't understand the nature and culture of people and the societies that are very much attached to the area where they born, lived, and they have their families and they have their history and think of it as their future. So unless when we talk about anticipatory action, unless we connect to the people and the communities to understand their vulnerabilities and to understand how to tackle these vulnerabilities through them, we will not be able to come with a strong early warning, early action plan in place.
Yeah. Also, thank you so much for reframing this word vulnerability, because I think, as you said, we are all vulnerable to climate change. And if nothing at all, what it has shown us is that what impacts one country directly will eventually impact all of us indirectly, right? So I think that's a really powerful framing. I just want to quickly follow up on that, because I think most organizations do want to engage with communities, and they often fail at doing it effectively. You have mentioned already, I think, the need to make sure that we provide the early warning, but we also provide the solution. What else has proven successful for you in terms of how you effectively engage vulnerable communities?
Thank you for this question. I think that as Red Cross, Red Crescent, we have the privilege of having national society from the community. And in every field visit, I go to every country. And when I talk to people, when I talk to displaced women, children, men, etc., actually they know the problem, but they need the answer. And for us, it's important to get the answer. I think one of the most important things is to engage and to ensure the listening and engaging people and communities into the anticipatory action planning, into collecting evidence. We need to stop doing evidence-based knowledge management based on desk research. We need to go and speak to people, including in high-risk area, hard-to-reach areas, and we can support in that, as been supporting in different subjects. This year, for example, we started also to think, and I'm so glad that it started by the Early Warning for All initiative, bringing different partners together, but with World Food Program, we came together this year at the MENA region to do an anticipatory action community of practice, where we bring together academia, private sector, civil society organization, national society, to work together collectively on the evidence-based knowledge management, on sharing information and data, on understanding the context, and this is all through engaging, listening, and including the community voices into the anticipatory action planning. Yeah. But also follow up and monitor that it's implemented the right way and people acted upon early warning.
Okay, thank you so much for the intervention. I want to turn to Mozambique, because I know that you also have some very good examples of what partnership has looked like for you in AA. Could you just share for us some of your learnings on the ground?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to be here. It's a pleasure for us to be here to share and learn from these things. So in Mozambique, the anticipatory action framework has been generating a huge impact with regards to partnership, where there is an active engagement of governmental sectors, UN agencies, civil society organizations, and other partners through the established technical working group, which led to the development of the country's first early warning system for drought. So these efforts were based on a coordinated development of the necessary tools to improve drought forecast and monitoring, and linking these enhanced products with strengthening risk analysis and contingency planning, linking up to relevant government stakeholders such as National Med Service, National Institute for Disaster Management and Risk Reduction, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So partners like WFP has been a very active promoters of in-country partnership under the Anticipatory Action Framework, and works in close collaboration which each actor providing custom-designed technical supports and integrating anticipatory action program with broader capacity strengthening efforts to enhance disaster management system. And capacity strengthening is shaped around each stakeholder and its needs, while fostering for further integration among them through the mentioned technical working group. The national institutions are also working jointly on deepened integration between anticipatory action, disaster response, and shock responsive social protection. So in particular, INGD, which is the National Institute for Disaster Management and Risk Reduction, is fostering a close relationship with the Minister of Gender, Children and Social Action and the National Institute for Social Action to link drought triggers to scale up of the cash-based social protection programs as part of the activation of drought anticipatory action plans. As one of the major results of these partnerships, in 2020, October this year, 2022, the government of Mozambique, through the the Technical Council for Disaster Management, officially approved the Manual of Standard Operating Procedures for the operationalization of the drought early warning system linked to anticipatory action. So this national tool contains important pieces defining droughts anticipatory action in the country. That includes 5 elements. 1, definition of droughts anticipatory action triggers, that is done by the Met Service, the National Catalogue of Anticipatory Action for Droughts, drought information flow system, and financial mechanism for the implementation of anticipatory action, and last, drought emergency alerts and declaration. So this manual was elaborated based on the regular discussions that took place in the technical working group where government sectors, UN agencies, and civil society organizations actively contributed for its design and conception. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your intervention. Leslie, we are sitting on a panel that's called The Power of Partnerships. I think we've had over here in terms of the community engagement, Mozambique has given us a good example of partnership with governments and international organizations, including WFP. What is the role of the private sector in all this? How can they support governments and other stakeholders to scale up AA?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. We are really delighted to be members of RIP because it brings together really all the stakeholders that you need to have a successful solution. The type of insurance that we provide is oriented towards mitigating the impact of climate change. And if you take a step back, we are seeing an increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters. And we believe that insurance is a powerful tool in terms of facilitating and financing response to these natural disasters. The way we have gone about designing the insurance product is such that we model the losses based on satellite data, which then allows us to pay claims within 10 business days of an event happening. In the case of the tropical cyclone Batsirai in Madagascar, we paid a claim to the Madagascan government within 3 days. Okay. The importance of paying claims early is that the governments and the humanitarian actors have funding very quickly to mount a more effective response and to improve outcomes. What we view our role as the private sector is to be innovative, is to develop the products that respond to the specific needs of the situation. But also it is equally important that we partner with governments like we have done in Mozambique, also with the humanitarian agencies like we do with the World Food Programme, with the START Network, and hopefully soon with the IFRC, because they are, for us, a means of reaching the beneficiaries of the claims that we pay that we will not be able to reach by ourselves. So in fact, it is by working together, contributing what we do best, working with people that do other things best, that we can bring everything together, and that's how the magic happens. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Leslie. I want to ask again, Mozambique, just one more question. In terms of what is needed to ensure that the governments, especially those dealing with vulnerable communities, what resources and tools do you think they need to be able to deliver on AA?
Actually, this question is it's a very big one, but to strengthen partnership, because as one of the previous panelists said, we cannot do this by ourselves.
Yeah.
So we need to strengthen partnerships, but we need as well to establish effective early warning systems that allow people to take early action before something happens. Okay. So what we are doing down there is to strengthen these partnerships with our partners and different government sectors, as well as engaging the local communities on the process. So we have them being parts of the process, not them being involved as a final beneficiaries of these approaches. So we are making them owners of this, so that we want to, in the future, our view is to have these early action systems, early anticipatory actions being part of the local development plans, so that we don't really need to go often and see it with these communities.
Yeah. No, that's actually really powerful, because as we know, grassroots-driven approaches tend to be much more sustainable. People have to feel that they own this initiative and that they are part of the solution versus just mere recipient of whatever support is given towards them. I want to open up. We're almost out of time, but I would like to squeeze in a question, if someone has a burning question for our speakers. I know this was also, there's a hand in the back.
Hello, thank you. This is the first time I actually asked a question, but I'm leaving. And I'm leaving with lots of questions more than answers.
Yeah.
I've noticed that in terms of, we talked about agriculture and all of these different things are happening. The world, I feel like right now, are becoming more sufficient, like lots of the first world countries are beginning to even plant things that aren't planted in those places. So there is a lot more isolation that's happening, and there's a lot more conversation in terms of looking at developing countries as giving them funding to do renewable energies. But globally, as we know, there are certain areas that have an excess of certain foods that are made so that we can trade. And even the world civilization grows in trade, right? Humans traded for the longest time. And I feel like when this is done and over with, and they've given us money to do a renewable energy, and our farms are up, a lot of these places are already creating their own foods and stuff. What's going to happen to people in developing countries? And is the World Food Program and these places are already keyed in and looking at the bigger picture of how now everyone, based on fear and security, is becoming more self-sufficient? What's going to happen to Africa and these places who have excess of that, food, and have a big part in the food crisis? So I just want to know if anybody's talking about that beyond funding and beyond giving us the means to create our own things. What is going to happen to our
Does anybody want to take that on the panel? Thank you so much for your thought-provoking question.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. And I do agree with you that it's probably something that is not being talked about enough. What we are working on, at least at this stage, right, is just making the local ecosystems more resilient in the face of climate change. So if you look at, say, a typical agricultural value chain as an example, you can start with small to medium scale farmers, but all those feed into the big agro processors. And if there is a shock somewhere along that system, then it's going to have a ripple effect across the entire value chain. And of course, that has implications for global trade, as you've just said. I don't know if my fellow panelists have something yet.
Thank you. And thank you so much for bringing Africa on the table.
Yes.
I actually am a bit optimistic, despite of everything, despite that the situation is not moving into very positive when it comes to climate change. We started, and I think that this is something new, and we need to continue on, which is having such a strategic, effective partnership that used not to happen before. We see now us coming together with the Early Warning for All initiative. We see REAP bringing partners together. We see UN coming with the Red Cross, Red Crescent, with civil society. We see all organizations talking about local-led action. But also we see Africa COP, which is COP27, which discussing implementation, discussing using no blah blah and buzzwords, but using real words and real situations and what can we do for the vulnerable communities and the most affected countries as well. So this is in its own creates a momentum for a change. And do we have the answers for all the questions? Now I doubt that anyone has the answer for all the questions, but at least we're moving, I think, in the right direction, because now we're doing a complementary approach rather than what we used to have, which is a parallel approach, and everyone looking only on what they are good at doing and doing it alone. And I let me quote one word that the SG for IFRC mentioned yesterday. There is a lot to be done. So we're not competing. We have to complement, and we have to come together, and we have to think on how we can implement solutions for the communities that's highly affected and have very little resources to allow them to act and act now. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I think this has been a really, really powerful conversation, and thank you for bringing hope and also accountability, because hope alone is not enough. We need accountability, we need implementation and action. And in this brief discussion, to sum up our conversation, we've heard from a broad range of organizations working in the anticipatory action space, and I would like to thank all our speakers for their time today. I'd also like to bring the discussion back to where we are right here at COP27. Governments' negotiations have gathered in these halls, aiming for consensus on long-term plans for mitigation, adaptation, and even dealing with losses and damage. The COP negotiations are crucial to ensuring that the world stays on track to tackling climate change. But while we're here, there are countless vulnerable communities, and as Ramya reminded us, we are all vulnerable, but they're the most vulnerable communities and people around the world who are suffering from the impacts of climate change. There are those who have lost their homes, their livelihoods, their cultural heritage, and even those who have lost their lives. Anticipatory action offers a practical, dignified, and even the most cost-effective approach to dealing with the climate hazards before they turn into disasters. And before we are confronted with yet another humanitarian crisis, I can just quickly interject as well as the World Food Programme that it's so dire right now with 828 million people who are going to bed hungry. And we're having to make the tough decision of taking food away from the hungry in order to feed the starving. And that's not a choice that anyone ever has to make. But this is the reality of climate change right now. We also know that we need an integrated approach to solving for this issue. The speakers that you've heard from today are already working to make this a reality. But one message has come through loud and clear, that more is needed. We need more, greater coverage by early warning systems. And this is actually being led by WMO, so thank you very much. And there's a plan to make this happen for many more communities. We need more funding, because again, plans on their own are not enough. we need to have the funds to implement them. And of course, ARC is working to deliver innovative finance in the face of increasing disaster. We all know that resources are limited, as we've discussed here. The humanitarian communities has developed the most innovative approaches that we are calling anticipatory action. But humanitarian resources are also overstretched. Taking anticipatory action to scale demanded by the climate crisis will require cross-sectoral partnerships that span humanitarian, climate, development, DRR, peace building, and others. Our speakers will continue to advocate for this kind of way of working through enhanced partnerships so that the challenges for the challenges now for you or the audience is what are you going to do as you leave this event? Who are you going to collaborate with, have a conversation with, bring to the table so that we can all collectively work on this issue? On that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I wish you a wonderful day. But please, before you depart, let's give a round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. Okay.